Welcome back to a bit of a later episode here on Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling. I shall see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhollow today. Yeah, it's a bit later than usual. I kind of lost track of time or whatever. Because it's a strange situation where I do actually have something kind of to talk about, but I'm not even really sure if it's something I should talk about on Animal Crossing. Not because it's like too personal or anything, but I'm like, I don't think it's going to make a particularly good conversation topic or anything. But obviously, and I mentioned over the past couple of episodes, I was like, I was going on a nostalgia trip, and I was actually finishing off the old My Little Pony series or whatever, which I, watched about halfway through and then, dropped around 8 years ago. Wait, does that add up? Yeah, around 8 years ago, and I thought I'd finish off for nostalgia's sake, but we'll get into that for a second. Good evening, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow at 7:08 PM on Monday, April 25th, 2022. We're now late here, but yeah, I actually got around to basically finishing it today, which is why I'm a bit later than usual, because I was actually watching the series finale, and I was just sort of thinking about what to even say or think about it, and I was like, oh yeah, I need to record an Animal Crossing video. I kind of forgot about that. My apologies, but it's weird. I'm not going to talk about My Little Pony Friendship is Magic or anything like that, or any analysis and that sort of thing. I think people have come and done it like far better than I ever could, and I also didn't watch like the first half, and I also didn't really. Aww, a gift from Wardell for Paradise Planning, because if you didn't see in the last episode, we did 50 customizations. What is it? Candles? Pardon? Ah, cute. Well, obviously we'll put that away in a very store in that secure area. But no, what was I going to say? Yeah, I'm not going to like analyze or anything, because I only watched half of it, and I also didn't properly like watch it. I only kind of like sort of watched it, because I ended up sort of like if you don't know, I watched it on double speed, and then I ended up like skipping through like a load of scenes if I thought I got the general gist of it. So it's basically I kind of got the gist of all the other episodes that I didn't watch. But yeah, I'm not really going to go into specifics about that sort of thing. I'm going to go, hello Fauna, I'm going to go into talking about I don't know, it's a sort of weird feeling once you've finished like any sort of like really good book, like a good movie, a good video game, any sort of media property or whatever. I mean, maybe a good song as well, but songs tend to be quite short, so I'm not sure if quite the impact is the same, but I don't see why it couldn't be. Yeah, now after finishing any sort of media property that you've, I mean, it may sound silly, but I suppose growing attached to for a little while. Oh, maybe it's not so silly to say, because of course you're going to grow attached to it, otherwise you probably wouldn't like stay around and finish it in the end. Unless it's a movie which is only like a couple of hours long, maybe you saw it through to the end. But especially for things like a TV series or a video game, which requires a lot more of your temporal investment into it, of course you're going to stick, if you didn't like it, why would you stick through to the end? And of course, maybe like some sort of weird sense of masochism, I don't know. But on the whole, normally when you play something to the end, you kind of see something through to the end, it's for a reason that you like it. You go to get attached to it, I suppose, over time. And yeah, it's a weird feeling I have with My Little Pony, because if you don't know, I started watching it like pretty near the beginning, I think, or like before the end of season 1, I think, and I carried on watching it all through to about season 5-ish or so, about halfway through season 5. But even then, it was kind of on and off. I kind of like stopped around the end of season 4, and the end of and like half of season 5, I kind of watched like here and there, kind of sparingly. And main reason is because I had exams at the time, and I just stopped them, and I just never picked it up again. And I'd got new things to sort of obsess over and finish over. But I am someone who I mean you hear what I talk about all the time. I always talk about nostalgic things, because I am someone who likes to well, I mean, I have a pretty good memory, and I like to, what's a word, sort of like not reconvene on those memories, but reflect on memories, I suppose, quite a lot, and think about those sort of times gone by. Not in a way about like, oh, they're never going to happen again, but sort of like reflect and see how they may have changed me, or what I think of them now, etc. And under a new perspective lens. I don't know. I'm trying to justify it in some like overly grandiose way, but I mean, I don't think it really needs much justification. I think it's kind of fair enough to have like your own nostalgia trips here and there. I kind of forgot what I was going to say about this. But yeah, there's a lot of things like I finished and seen through to the end, and I thoroughly enjoyed, to be honest. And honestly, I don't think My Little Pony is any different. I'm not going to say like, oh, I hated it or anything. There were good sides, there were bad sides, and that's just kind of how it was as a complete package. And yeah, I enjoyed it in the end, I suppose. But it's something which I suppose I hold so nostalgically from when I was younger. Like, it makes me think about those times when I was like, I don't even know when I started watching it, maybe when I was like 11 or something, or 12, and now, of course, how different I am then. And it's sort of like, I guess it kind of feels like I'm closing a book, or closing a chapter on. I finally like read the final chapter, I suppose, and that last page of that book or something, which I finally never got around to. It's just been sort of like hanging there as a loose thread this entire time, and now it's finally been pulled and seen through to the end. It's sort of just like it's sort of like a closure for a younger me, if I want to try and put it a bit more poetically. Even though, of course, watching it now, I don't have the same attachment to the characters or anything, or the story, investment in the story. I only really sort of see it through a much more nostalgic, rose-tinted lens, where I'm just like, oh, it's quite entertaining. And of course now, it comes with its upsides and downsides. Now I certainly look at things much more critically. So when I see an episode which is I don't particularly like, or I think has bad writing, well, no, I shouldn't say it's bad writing. I feel like it's kind of out of place for me to really criticise whether something has bad writing or not, because I'm not an expert writer or anything. But an episode I didn't enjoy, or an episode which I had its problems, which I couldn't really reconvene with my own mind, I'm much more critical of it or whatever. But then, I suppose it allows me to appreciate it from a different perspective of one, rather than being invested into the story, or one from perspective of a human side of someone had to write that story and being like, all right, even though I don't totally agree with it, and I have do I agree with the overarching branching message? What do I think it could have done differently? What do I think it was missing, etc., etc. And it's, I suppose, fueling my own creative lessons, I suppose would be a better way to put it. Being like, what sort of mistakes can you and lessons can you learn from this? Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird mixed feeling I have. It's not one of sadness or anything. Maybe it is a little bit of sadness, because it sort of feels like, the sort of same sense that you always get when something's over. You're just like, oh, it's over now. I guess that's kind of it. But I don't mean it in the sense where I'm just like, oh, I'm inconsolable. My heart is shattered into a million pieces now, but it's over. It's the sort of thing where I'm like, well, I'm glad I could, I suppose, see it through to the end, if anything. It was a grand old ride, and I guess the only thing I'm mildly not sad about, but sort of kind of a shame I missed out on, is the fact that I didn't see it through to the end with everyone else around that time. I'm seeing it through to the end 2 years later, after it's already done, and the whole next generation started. But it's kind of putting a nice little tidy little bow on it. And, I felt similar things, I think, to a lot of other things that I really enjoyed. Undertale was my favourite game, probably of all. Well, okay, well, I'm not going to say it's my favourite game of all. I think by conventional definitions, it is my favourite game of all time. But it's sort of there's things I like about it more, and there's things I like in other games more, etc., etc. I certainly do appreciate it a lot, but it's probably the highest average, I think, across most things. It's kind of why I don't like doing tier list style things of having to choose and pick a favourite. It's there's so many different metrics that I tend to judge things by. Anything can be my favourite at any different point. Yeah, but there's a load of other things I liked, like Undertale, Night in the Woods, especially just from a video game perspective. Other things like Homestuck, which is was online webcomic. It's just whenever they've ended, it always leaves you with a sort of, I'm not going to say sad feeling. I mean, it is kind of a sad feeling, but it's not a depressing feeling. It's more of I'm glad that happened. There's sort of a melancholic feeling, perhaps, is a better way to put it. It's sort of it's happened, and the sadness comes from the fact that I know there's no more. That's it. That's all there's ever going to be. But the happiness of what happy times, I suppose, it brought me in the first place, is really what you're meant to hold and reflect and keep with you after all the time. But it's sort of a weird mixed feeling, because I've delayed the gratification feeling of that for let me think, 6-7 years. I'm not really sure now. What I'm basically trying to say is I'm glad I sort of basically put an end to that chapter, that unfinished story, I suppose, from earlier in my life. It's nice to give things a sort of sense of closure, and I suppose that has given it to, in some sense. I mean, I'm talking it's some sort of loss I've experienced or something, and it's not really. After all, it's just a TV show that I just ended up not watching for a long while. I don't really know how to put it into words, I suppose. Because any words I'm trying to say seem a little bit overly grandiose than what I'm properly trying to convey. It's more yeah, I don't know. I suppose it's sort of a reliving your childhood in a certain sense, and being able to actually finish what the childhood you never really got round to. You get me? You follow me? So yeah, no, I'm not going to go and delve into a literary story analysis or that sort of thing. Long and short of it is the episodes I like and those episodes I didn't like, but it had a really nice finale. On the whole. I will say I kind of really hated Discord being behind everything towards the end of the episodes of a series, but whatever. It's neither here nor there. And I think part of the reason that it feels a little bit more special to me is I don't think I've experienced many sort of like seasons finales or that sort of things, or things of that ilk, because I tend to not really watch TV series in the first place, and TV series are really one of the best mediums, I suppose, for you to probably get invested in. Like, books probably are the only one which might beat it, I suppose, and I suppose movie series as well, which kind of fall under a similar category. And I'm sure it's what probably a lot of people felt like if you're a fan of a Marvel Cinematic Universe, you know, with Infinity War and Endgame, you know. And I talked to my friend, he really loves those like superhero movies and was really invested in them, and he said he like cried during Infinity War and Endgame because it was just, you know, I guess it was a culmination of everything. You might be perhaps unsurprised to learn that I did not cry at the end of Endgame, and I don't mean that as like a flex or anything. I just like I'm super not invested in Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's actually a similar sort of feeling now I think about it. But like with a Marvel Cinematic Universe, I'm seeing it from the outside in rather than the inside out. I guess is probably how I want to put it. Like watching Endgame, I could tell it was so climactic. I could tell there was huge amounts of going on, huge amounts of like story just all like wrapping up in one, and it was a huge moment seeing all the characters like come together. But obviously for me it held no weight, but for my friends it obviously held a lot more, because they knew other characters, they've been through their stories, they've seen how they changed and grown and how their stories progressed and all the pitfalls that they've fallen into and all the highs that they reached, and seeing it finally culminate in basically this grand old showing as a final sort of farewell and send-off. It's, you know, heart-wrenching in a certain way, and heart-wrenching in that I'm so happy to see this finally come to fruition, but also heart-wrenching that this is the end, isn't it? And I feel like those sort of farewells are always one of the hardest ones to say, aren't they? I mean, it's the thing I used to say when I was younger, which I still stand by now, is that like this isn't farewell, it's just goodbye for now. I don't know where I picked it up from. I must have picked it up from somewhere, but it's sort of that sort of thing. But now I'm seeing it from the inside out, and it's strange because I don't think many things could probably invoke this sort of very specific feeling into me. Like I'm sure it's happened for a lot of you out there. You know, you've seen a TV series or you've finished a really good book series and you're just like, oh, that sort of melancholic feeling. Yeah, I guess it's kind of rare to come by for me personally, because there's not many things which I've kept like going for such a huge long, like media properties I've kept consuming for a huge long time. A lot of the times they're either like short-lived, like, you know, Undertale, just kind of like, whoop, game's done, that's done, or it's like, if it's really long, like in case of Miles Pony, you know, I got through like halfway through seasons when I just kind of dropped it, and I was like, you know, this is getting a bit too long, and you know, it just suddenly slowly like dwindles off rather than getting that sort of climactic melancholic end, which I feel like really sort of solidifies it in your memory. And I suppose by doing it now, despite the feeling, the gratification feeling being rather delayed, it's sort of nice to put nice to experience it now in the end. Not to say that I don't get the melancholic feeling after finishing something, but it feels different in a sense when it's such a large part, you know. I'm not going to say Miles Pony was like a large part of my life. It was a medium part of my life, I suppose. Certainly in the early seasons, it was one of my bigger interests, but then of course it sort of dwindles and it faded out, which is kind of sad to talk about now. And of course now again it's sort of like I look at it in the same sense that, you know, you might pick up your old childhood toy and just be like, oh, I used to remember when I played with this. It's nice to live in that moment for now, I suppose, but the times have changed and the times have moved on, along with the next generation starting, of course, which I've heard about. I remember I actually talked to my friend about it, and, you know, obviously we've been friends a long time, and he knew me, of course, when I used to really love Man and Pony, and he, you know, used to like talk about it, or at least I suppose indulge myself in. That's probably not the best phrasing. I used to bring it up like every now and then. He knew it was one of my strong interests, and, you know, I talked about the fact that I can't remember how it even came up in conversation, but I was like, oh yeah, there's like a new generation that started like a year ago or something, and he was like, oh yeah, what's that like? And I was like, I don't know, I haven't seen it. And he's like, you don't even know their names or anything? And I was like, no, I don't. I don't even know anything about the new series or anything. And, you know, he said it like he was like so surprised. Obviously, you know, at the time I was a bit like, but, you know, come to understand, it was like, obviously it seems a bit strange. It was such like a thing I was interested in before, and now it's sort of the fact it's slowly sort of dwindled out, isn't it? Kind of sad scene in a certain way. I suppose that's from the outside in perspective. You kind of be like, oh, okay, that's, you know, it's not like it's a big shake up or anything. It's just sort of like, oh, you know, I guess that association was so strongly there for you, but the fact that it didn't really come to any fruition past that is sort of just like, oh, anticlimactic, I suppose. But now it's been, you know, fully closed and the full stop has been put in place, and it's like, yeah, I guess I do feel a little bit sad about it in a certain way, but also quite happy at the same time. Like, because fair enough, I could actually just like watch it all over again if I particularly wanted to. I don't know if I particularly will. It's quite an investment in time. Like, let me think. It's about 9 times 26 times 20, so 3 times 26. What's that? 78. About 78 hours to watch the entire thing. Which, you know, I cut down to probably. And see, I like double timed it. I like 2.5 speed times it, so 75. I cut it down to like 50 hours or something over the course of like a couple of weeks. Well, I only had to watch half of it, so I guess I cut it down to about 25 hours over the course of a couple of weeks. And it's yeah, I don't know. You might be like, you're talking about it a lot for someone who said they weren't going to, I wasn't going to talk about it. And yeah, I don't really. I mean, I don't want to talk about the specifics about it because I can't really think about how to like I've watched too many episodes, and like quick fire succession is going to be quite difficult to really solidify what I want, you know, want to say about it. I'd say it's a nice series overall, and the whole reason I like watching it in the first place because I tend to like ensemble shows of like characters just being good friends, I suppose, and seeing them work together, I suppose. And yes, it is a children's show, well, primarily directed at children's, but I think it's can be enjoyable as if you're older. But I'm not going to say it's incredibly deep. And sometimes it's deep, sometimes. I mean, it's also very straightforward at other times, you know. Hit or miss is probably what I would say, especially towards the end of a life cycle. The consistency of the episodes really went up and down, I think. Some of them were really great, in my opinion, and some of them were just not very good, is probably how I put it. Or at least, not to my personal tastes. But, yeah, but, you know, this is kind of, well, anything, I suppose. Everything is full of ups and downs, so that's kind of it. I don't know, I'm just kind of like basking in this nostalgic feeling for a little bit longer. It's a rare feeling to come by, and you know me, I tend to like my melancholic feelings. You know how much I love sad media properties for no apparent reason in particular. I don't really know why. Sadness as an emotion, I feel like, is much more poignant to me than necessarily happiness. When expressed with media, when expressed in real life, obviously, you know, it's quite different, but I feel like it sort of sinks its claws into my sort of memory, and it emotionally leaves much more of an impact on me than other emotions do. And everyone's got their own different like emotions which they draw for things, you know. Some people like really love happy things, so they chase after happy media properties and that sort of thing. Some people, I suppose, love being outraged, so they like drama and angry things. I don't know, to each our own, I suppose, in the end. It's sort of just weird, like I feel like I'm in a sort of like nostalgic limbo right now where I don't really know what to think, I suppose. It's sort of like a you know, but part of me is kind of sad I didn't see it through to the end at the time. Like it ended 2 years or maybe 3 years ago now. I can't really recall, and it's sort of like you know, I feel like I've turned up to the after party and everyone's already left, and I'm sort of just like going around cleaning up, like not cleaning up, I suppose, but picking up on all the things left behind, being like, look at all of this, you know. Some sort of archaeologist for my own past memories and experiences. Or perhaps an archaeologist for what could have been. We're also clearing up the weeds back here because I don't want the ones behind the entire place to exist. It seems like they spread down there. I didn't know they could spread down there, to be honest. Hold on, that's not the right button. We missed out some weeds here and there. Yeah, it's sort of like the afterglow of what's happened, and it's sort of like I don't really know what to think. part of me, of course, is quite sad it's over, but I feel like it. The best thing is that it ended on a good note, I suppose, at all. I'm sure there's a lot of other media properties which people have loved over the years, but unfortunately never really got the sort of closure that it particularly deserved, leaving the fans, you know, wanting or desiring for more. I suppose it's lucky in the sense that I actually got any sort of closure for it in the end. It's just, I don't know, it's weird. It's, I mean, obviously you've probably been through these sort of feelings before. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That sort of like but the twilight after, the twilight in between the sunrise and the sunset. you know, the sunset of a night being like without the next big thing, I suppose, that you're looking forward to, and the sunrise being, and the daytime being like in that moment. It's that. But also totally fueled by nostalgia at the same time. part of me wants to go and like watch through like the entire thing again and actually like think about my thoughts on it or that sort of thing and put together like something much more coherent. But you know, I think it's a bit passé now, isn't it? I mean, the My Little Pony fad has like come and gone. Like even like when I stopped watching it, it's kind of when it was dying out, I suppose. Not dying out per se, but like losing its steam and luster that it was carrying on for so long. It's like, yeah, you know, sometimes it's fine just to indulge yourself in them a little bit, and then let those sleeping ponies lie, I suppose. It's just, I kind of wanted to get my thoughts out about it. And you know, that's kind of what this Animal Crossing thing is. Well, 90% of the time it's just about me talking about random stuff in the podcast style sort of thing. You know, why can't I talk about my own sort of experiences and emotions here and there? And this is one of them. I just don't really know what to really say about it. It's sort of just like I don't know. I suppose it was just one of the more nostalgic experiences of my life. You know, watching the episodes, it sort of sent me like way back in time when I used to watch them, when I used to, you know, I suppose even be in those sort of times when you're learning similar sort of friendship lessons, quote, quote, at the same time, and, you know, learning these sort of life experiences and taking things not for granted per se, but not really realising those moments will be gone, I suppose, once they're done. I suppose that's why. It sort of sent me back on a nostalgic trip, and it sort of made me reflect on times gone by. Not in a way that I'm just like, oh, you know, those good old days when we'll never get back to those sort of highs again, like in a pessimistic sense. In a sense, I'm like, oh, remember that time? You know, kind of like when you look through an old photo album. Apparently this entire episode is going to be full of me analogies trying to describe what I'm feeling, but when you look through like a photo album, being like, oh, remember that good old time when you did that and this, that, or the other, you know? Watching the TV series, My Little Pony was just kind of like that, you know? Watching these characters being like, oh, you know, remember when I used to, you know, try and emulate some of these, like, the lessons that they did or something, like being kind, being generous, etc, etc, etc. It's sort of just like, well, I'm not sure if it was ever exactly like that, but still. The enjoyment I used to have, I suppose, by watching it. That's kind of what's gone. Not kind of what's gone, hold on. That's kind of what I was like, not recollecting, reminiscing on. And it feels weird, I suppose, that it's come to an end after being left so open for so long, right? I guess that's kind of why. I guess that's kind of what I'm feeling, huh? I'm trying to think of anything else in particular which has been so long and I've just like never gotten around to finishing it. Like, I guess Homestuck, technically, in some sort of sense. Homestuck was one I actually kind of finished along with it actually ending. And that's mainly due to the fact that it finished, let me think. I started it like quite late. I started it around Act 5, which I would say is probably about halfway through it. So I kind of, like, by the time I like caught up to like a modern day material, it was kind of like, I don't even remember the exact moment I caught up anymore, so it's a bit hard for me to say in particular, but it's sort of like seeing it through to the end just kind of made sense, I suppose, at that point. A similar sort of feeling, and I remember watching that sort of finale and that ending, and then talking about it with my friend who was also like reading through it at the time, and I was like, oh, you know, to be fair, Homestuck had a rather anticlimactic ending, if I recall. It was like, I remember it was beautifully animated. It was so like amazingly flourished and everything, but it just like, I think what I recall is it failed to like very neatly wrap up all the sort of like story elements. Like the story elements didn't feel like they were tied together with a nice bow. It sort of felt like they were just there. Which, you know, credit to My Little Pony and Friendship is Magic and the writing staff, who I understand have. Wait, how do we add things to this again? I don't want to remove it. Oh, we had to do this, right? Yeah, register. It's been so long since I've had to add something, but KK Dub, here we go. Yeah, to be fair to the My Little Pony team, they actually did a pretty good job, I think, of rounding up that series. And I feel like the finale is probably the most important part of any sort of series or video game, or the end of the line. It's the final farewell, not just, I suppose, for the creator to their own project, but from the creator and the project to the fans who've consumed it and who've seen it through this entire way. having like a big old finale, having something which celebrates its moments, its high points and its low points, I suppose, all in all, and gives it time to neatly wrap everything up and to finally say goodbye to it, I suppose, is, you know, it's probably one of, and I'd imagine one of the hardest things to write about. From like a creative writing perspective, it must be very difficult to get that sort of balance story-wise completely 100% right, to really make it like a satisfying ending without feeling like not the desire that there should be more, because that's fine. I feel like that's always going to be the sort of like clamoring feeling afterwards. After you watch it, fans will always just be like, I wish there were more, you know, because that's who doesn't want more of a good thing, I suppose. But being able to be like, you know, the fans wanting more, but also like being able to acknowledge at the same time, yeah, that was a good place for it to end. Even if through all of its flaws and its imperfections, you know. And I suppose I just kind of wanted to articulate it out loud. So this is quite a self-indulgent, I suppose, Animal Crossing episode, where I just kind of wanted to talk about my own sort of thoughts and feelings on it, just being like, you know, that was a chapter in my life that I find, well, not a chapter, and like, it's not quite that sort of life-defining for me, but like, it's a small, like, it's a frayed piece of rope which I finally tied, I suppose, to the end, into a nice little bow. After it sitting there, I suppose, at the bottom of my desk drawers for so long. In fact, it actually came to an end. It's sort of just like never thought I'd see the day, but here it is. And it brought me back to that teenage mind, a very different me. Just for that moment, I suppose. I was that 12-year-old me watching that first episode all over again. Who even knew what would come in store? Because I'm sure My Little Pony sparked a lot of what I really loved about like ensemble shows, about, you know, things and stories about like groups of friends, I suppose, you know, working together, and like a whole ensemble cast of different people, different, you know, characters coming together and, you know, being able to resolve the differences and the sacrifices they make, I suppose, for friendship in that sort of sense. Perhaps why I have such a sort of, I suppose, overly cheery, I'm not going to say I have an overly cheery personality, because I don't think that's right, but overly like fluffy and optimistic, idealistic sort of outlook on things like that, especially. You know, I'm certainly not the type of person to shy away from being like, oh, I love my friends a lot, and I don't mean that sarcastically, of course. I love my friends very dearly, and I only want the best of them, and that sort of thing. I'm very, you know, forthcoming when it comes to, I feel like, compliments, etc., and things like that. I'm sure it's, you know, I guess it's because like it probably has, you know, more than I realised, I suppose, not defined me as a person, but helped me, or I suppose defined parts of me as a person. And that's kind of why. Perhaps that meant a lot more to me than I really understood. And now actually having it come to the end and seeing it from a more adult perspective, I suppose, I can sort of like tie all my thoughts very neatly together. And it's nice to have this Animal Crossing episode, I suppose, to really talk it through and think about it. Otherwise I sort of just be like, not wallowing per se, but sort of like swelling in my own sort of like emotions, being like, man, I don't know what to feel about this. Is this good or bad? And, you know, I can definitively say it's completely good. It's always nice to have something that you care so deeply about that when it's gone, you can say you miss it, you know. You miss it because you love it, I suppose, that much. Reminds me of a story I wrote for a writing group, I suppose. If you miss something a lot, it just means that you really loved it, I suppose. I suppose that's to a certain extent true. It really was like defining, I suppose, through my childhood. And it feels like, I don't know, I guess it's sort of like saying goodbye to that part of the childhood, which never really got the goodbye it deserved before. And now it kind of finally has. Oh well. I don't know what else to say in this last minute. Am I going to watch the new Generation 5 series? Probably not. You know, that one Generation 4, I think that's enough for me. That's it. I got like other things I'm supposed to move on to. I hope I can recreate that sort of feeling in the future. Like, I've talked about this before, and I was like, oh, you know, it'd be great to be able to create like a sort of like childhood media property, something like that as well, where, you know, you can tell the sort of stories and have that sort of impact on people for years to come. That's what I'd love to do someday. Oh well, we'll see how that plans out. But yeah, and there's my very self-indulgent, I suppose, episode for me today, where I can talk about, my feelings and stuff. So I'm going to round off this episode here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. We've spent Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Any likes, comments, subscription, shares, I greatly appreciate it. Join me, Dear Darling, in Discord. Follow me on Twitter down below. Hope we see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.